Hi, this is Intrigue, and this is my Paladin PMet, and today I'm going to do a Holy Paladin guide. First, I'm going to start off with stats. As a Holy Paladin, your best stat is Mastery. You want to gem Mastery as much as you possibly can. You can meet socket bonuses if they're good, like a lot of Int, as you can see. In that case, you will want to put Int Mastery gems in red sockets and Spirit Mastery in blue sockets. But primarily you want to gem Mastery. Haste is important if you're Spec Eternal Flame because at certain breakpoints you will get more ticks of Eternal Flame. I believe those breakpoints are 3,506 for like the first EF breakpoint, and then for the second it is 7,170. For these, you should not have to gem Haste. If you're not Spec Eternal Flame, Haste is still your second best stat, because with Selfless Healer, you do not need as much Spirit, because it reduces the cost of Holy Radiance. And so Haste just is the second best stat always, pretty much. Then as for Spirit, it's recommended that for Eternal Flame build, comfortable Spirit levels are around 15 to 16,000. You can swing it with less. I am only just about 15,000, not even. Next, I'm going to talk about your spec. For your first talent, you're pretty much always going to want Speed of Light because it's a sprint. It's on a 45-second cooldown, so you can't use it a lot. You're still going to be pretty slow on runs back from wiping, but during a fight, if you need a speed boost for a short period of time, this is what's useful, and that's usually how things are going to be. Your second talent is based on whatever you want. Repentance and Fist of Justice are both good choices. I've never used Evil as a point of view. For the next tier, you will be choosing between either Selfless Healer or Eternal Flame. The important thing to know is that depending on how you choose to spec with this, that's going to be how you spend your holy power. If you spec Eternal Flame, you should not be using Light of Dawn, really at all, unless you absolutely have to save people. Eternal Flame is just so much stronger of a holy power spender. For Selfless Healer, you will be using Judgment in your rotation as well, since it gives you a buff and also generates holy power when you're spec'd into Selfless Healer. And you're going to be spending your holy power on Light of Dawn only. The next talent tier, all of these are good. Clemency gives you extra Hand of Sacks, freedoms, protections, and salvations, but that's not useful on every fight. If you're always tank healing, this can be good. Hand of Purity is a short cooldown that you can throw on somebody that reduces all their damage taken by 10%, but damage from harmful periodic effects is reduced by an additional 80% for 6 seconds. It only has a 30-second cooldown. So I use this on Dark Shaman in particular. Unbreakable Spirit is your go-to talent if you're not using either of the other two. So if you don't need the additional like Hand of Protections, or if you don't need Hand of Purity, you should really spec Unbreakable Spirit because it reduces your cooldown on Divine Shield, Divine Protection, and Lay on Hands by 50%. Just by default. They changed it. It used to be based on your holy power spent, would reduce the cooldown. no longer. It's just, it halves the cooldown on it. And reducing the cooldown on your Lay on Hands provides some synergy with the Glyph of Divinity, so you can use it twice in a fight, and I'll address that later. For this talent tier, 75, you will always want Holy Avenger. A lot of people like Divine Purpose because they don't have to use another button. And sometimes it procs back to back to back, which is cool. But it's very RNG and you can't control it. And sometimes it'll just proc at bad times. Sometimes it'll proc at good times, sure, but Holy Avenger is way stronger. And for Holy Avenger, you're going to want to use this often at the beginning of a lot of fights. And that way you can also pre-pot it, and it's really good. And obviously, you know, Holy Avenger, if you're Spec EF, then you get to coat the raid with EFs right at the start of the fight, which is good on something like Malkarak. Or, you know, you can use a lot of Light of Dawn. On some fights, you don't use it at the start, though. And then for the last tier, you do not use Execution Sentence. I've never seen a Holy Paladin using that. You're choosing between either Holy Prism or Light's Hammer. Light's Hammer is good if the raid is stacked for the parts of the fight that matter. And Holy Prism is good if the raid is more, like, spaced out. So, onto Glyphs. For Glyphs, you're pretty much going to use Glyph of Beacon of Light, Glyph of Hand of Sac, and I'm not using it right now, but Glyph of Divinity. You're going to want these for almost every fight. Right now, I'm using Glyph of Divine Protection instead of Glyph of Divinity because I am working on Heroic Paragons, and the physical damage reduction is nice for certain parts of that fight that are causing us problems. And also, I use Selfless Healer for that fight, so I don't need the mana from Divinity. If you're using Eternal Flame, you should definitely be using Glyph of Divinity. Glyph of Beacon of Light is really nice for tank swaps, and you will want to use this on any fight where you have more than one tank tanking. The only fight where I swap this out is Spoils of Pandaria, and then I swap it out for Glyph of Protector of the Innocent because I use Eternal Flame on that. So, since I'm only healing one tank, I don't swap my beacon around. Glyphs you want to avoid, by the way. Glyph of Illumination is only mana positive if you have below 7k spirit, I believe. Glyph of Flash of Light seems appealing, but it's really not. Don't use that. Though it's better than like Glyph of Illumination or Glyph of Divine Play, which is pointless. It used to be decent back when Divine Plea had a Mortal Strike effect to your healing, but now it just makes it have a shorter cooldown but return less mana. So it basically makes you cast it twice as much. So you're wasting GCDs by glyphing this. So don't use Glyph of Divine Plea. I see a lot of people using that. Holy shock, you don't want to use this glyph because it reduces your healing. That's pretty straightforward. Glyph of Light of Dawn, you don't want to use this either. And pretty much the rest of these are whatever. So that's glyphs. Your minor glyphs don't matter. The only thing I'd say is Glyph of Falling Avenger is a double-edged sword. If you get knocked up into the air on a fight such as Malkarak or Black Fuse and you have Avenging Wrath running, then you're gonna slow fall and waste more time when you have your throughput cooldown running, so just keep that in mind. But it is nice if you don't have it running, but you can't predict, really, when you're going to be knocked into the air or not, because, yeah, the rest of these are pointless, though. As a Holy Paladin, you have several direct single-target heals, which are Flash of Light, Holy Light, Divine Light, Holy Shock, and either Word of Glory or Eternal Flame. You want to use Holy Shock on cooldown always. You will use Eternal Flame if you're talented that way. Otherwise, instead of Word of Glory, you will just generally want to use Light of Dawn to keep your absorbs up. The direct heals aren't really used unless you really have to be direct healing someone. During your legendary metagem procs, however, it is wise to squeeze in 1 or 2 flash of lights depending how quickly you react. Then your AoE heals are Holy Radiance, which will be your primary holy power generator in a raid environment, and Holy Shock. But Holy Shock procs Daybreak after Holy Radiance casts, which is an AoE heal as well. And then you spend that holy power on either Eternal Flame or Light of Dawn. That's pretty much it for your healing spells. You also have Lay on Hands, of course, but that has a long cooldown. If you're talented into Unbreakable Spirit, you can squeeze in 2 Lay on Hands in one raid encounter, unless you do it really fast, under 5 minutes-ish. But if you're talented into Glyph of Divinity, this gives you a mana return for using Lay on Hands at the expense of increasing the cooldown of Lay on Hands. It's still worth it to do that if you need the mana. As for other spells, if you are talented into Selfless Healer, you will be using Judgment on cooldown. This helps your Holy Radiance cast, which is primarily what you will be using. You will get them buffed and have their cast time and mana cost reduced. And it stacks up to 3, but you will cast on 1 at least. So your rotation for Selfless Healer is something like Judgment, Holy Radiance, Holy Shock, Light of Dawn, repeat. So other spells you have as a paladin, we have a lot of cooldowns. Hand of Sacrifice is your tank cooldown. Lay on Hands, which I've already addressed, is an emergency healing cooldown which applies forbearance. Hand of Protection, also called BOP, because it used to be a blessing, protects somebody from physical damage, but prevents them from doing physical damage. This also includes your own judgment. You can use it on yourself, but be warned that if you do, you will probably have to remove it by casting, say, Hand of Freedom on yourself, which will remove another hand of protection, and then you can judge freely again. You also have Hand of Salve, which is a threat drop. You also have the raid cooldown Devo Aura, which grants immunity to silence and interrupt effects, which usually isn't a big deal in a raid, but for Thok, it does. And it reduces magic damage taken by 20% for 6 seconds. This is a 3-minute cooldown, and it used to be Holy Paladins only, called Aura Mastery. It is now all Paladins have this. The throughput cooldowns you have are Divine Favor, Holy Avenger, Avenging Wrath, and Guardian of Ancient Kings. Divine Favor with the 4-piece for Siege of Orgrimmar is only a 2-minute cooldown, and it also grants you a great deal of mastery. What you want to do is macro Holy Avenger and Divine Favor together, because they are both 2-minute cooldowns. And this means that you will be generating holy power more quickly because of the increased haste, and the things you cast with that holy power will have more mastery and crit chance. So it's a very good thing to do that has a lot of synergy together. Your 2 3-minute cooldowns are both throughput oriented directly. Avenging Wrath increases all your damage and healing by 20%, and Guardian of Ancient Kings literally doubles your healing. It used to behave differently, but it now just casts twice your heals. The only thing is, it will not duplicate Eternal Flame hot ticks, and I believe it does duplicate the beacon component, however. It also grants you 10% haste. Generally, you can use these two together as well. If you want the greatest amount of throughput, you can use what we call the kitchen sink, which is all 4 throughput cooldowns at once. Most fights are designed such that you might want to space them out a little bit more than that. But if there's a certain, like, shit hits the fan moment, you can definitely go, like, balls to the wall and heal completely everything, or try. So, let's see. One thing a lot of pallies do is Crusaders Strike for Holy Power. This is generally a waste of a GCD. The only time that I even cast it occasionally is on Thok. If I know I can't get a cast off and I'm not at more than 2 Holy Power, I can just hit Crusader Strike on the boss, because sometimes I'll be in melee pile. But you can pretty much safely just not even have this bound. Denounced is our DPS spell. You're not gonna be like a Disc Priest or a Mistweaver with your DPS, but if you want to throw out some, attacks, you use Denounce. Though be warned, it does cost 5k mana per cast, and that is, it can add up if you're just spamming it constantly. We also have the Interrupt Rebuke, and we have Hodge, or Fist of Justice if you're talented into that. Oh, also Divine Protection reduces magic damage taken, or if you glyph it, it also reduces physical damage taken as well, at the expense of your magic reduction. One last thing is Divine Shield will grant you immunity. It's kind of similar to Hand of Protection, but just a lot better. It does reduce the damage you deal by 50%, but as a Holy Paladin, that's usually not a big deal. The immunity is really worth it. I'm talented into Unbreakable Spirit, so the cooldown on it is 2.5 minutes. If you're not talented into that, it's 5 minutes. You also have your level 90 talents, which are Holy Prism or the Light's Hammer. Light's Hammer healing will be classified as Arcing Light on meters or logs. Holy Prism is just Holy Prism. Holy Prism is an interesting spell because it splashes AoE damage if you use it on a friendly target, and it splashes AoE healing if you use it on an enemy target. So as a healer, you're going to generally want to use it on an enemy target. This means you're going to have to be using some sort of healing method that involves mouse overs or click binds and not target to heal, because that's inefficient, especially if you're using Selfless Healer with Judgment, because you're just going to drive yourself crazy constantly swapping between friendly and unfriendly targets, and there's just no way you can play at complete efficiency if you're doing that. Even if it feels like you are, you would be doing better if you didn't. Light's Hammer, though, is something you want to use if a great deal of the raid is stacked up, or if your melee are generally clustered together. Basically, just remember to keep your beacon on the tanks. Don't worry about splashing your beacon around onto other people. That's a waste. Unless it's a very specific circumstance and you know what you're doing, such as if there's AoE on the raid and the tanks aren't taking damage and you have a Disc Priest, you can beacon the Disc Priest. That means that Disc Priest Atonement heals are less likely to hit them, because if a Disc Priest Atonement hits the Disc Priest, it will be divided by half. So this ensures that the Disc Priest is getting full capacity atonements. So yeah, because you want to help your Disc Priest out. Yeah, but it's a good idea. And yeah, just love your Holy Radiance. Have some indicator on your frames for what people are ideal targets, or targets with, you know, people within 10 yards. Use Holy Radiance on those people. Keep your absorbs up on the raid as much as you can. Either way you play, Eternal Flame or Selfless Healer, your goal is really to try to play like a Disc Priest and keep absorbs up. So that's that. If you are spamming single target heals a great deal, then you are not playing as well as you could. Unless those single target heals are Eternal Flame on as many targets as possible, which is correct. But yeah. And don't forget to use Divine Plea early and often. It's based on your spirit now. It doesn't reduce your healing anymore. And it's good. It's a 2-minute cooldown, which is not bad at all. Here, I'm going to show you one last thing, which is how I reforge. This is how I reforge. I'm using Reforge Light, and here it is. It says Haste to 6,607, which is not the break point. And I'm sure you're wondering why that is. It is because I have the Prismatic Prison of Pride Trinket Heroic upgraded 2 times. This is the exact amount of haste I need to reforge to without this equipped in order to have 7170 haste when I equip it again. So there's a spreadsheet with that, and I will try to post it in my description. So after I have this haste to this cap, I have mastery, then spirit, and lastly crit, which we don't care about. So this is what I've come up with. These are my stats unbuffed. I'm pretty happy with that. Obviously, at my item level 575, I have a lot of stats to throw around. I would not recommend trying to go to the 7170 haste breakpoint if you are not above, say, 560 item level, at least. It's going to be very hard, and you're going to be reforging out of spirit or mastery, and you don't want to really do that. So you can reforge out of spirit. That's what I did. But you will have to get used to what your natural regen feels like again, and it may not be comfortable for you. Anyway, I hope this video helped. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I will try to answer them to the best of my abilities. And also, everything I've learned has basically been from the MMO Champion Paladin forums. So thanks to those guys. And if you have any interest in that, you can go there too. And there is a great deal of information there about Holy Paladins. So have a good day, and thank you for watching.